Gotta figure that out. Camera rolling. Camera set and action.
Good morning, Dr. EnRico Melson.
Good morning.
Welcome on behalf of the viewers of YouTube. We welcome you once again to be able to provide us with education on the 7 pillars of integral education meta systems. And we are here today to hear your overview and your definition of the second pillar, education of empowerment. Thank you.
Thank you. As I mentioned in the first overview segment on the 7 pillars, that education for empowerment is essential for all beings to understand this sense of empowerment as a loosely utilized term is nonetheless still very relevant, is nonetheless very necessary. First, let's talk a little bit about what is empowerment and what may not be empowerment. There's someone by the name of Dr. David Hawkins who wrote a number of books which are truly breakthrough books in the areas of orthomolecular psychiatry and psychoneuroimmunology and consciousness in general. And Dr. Hawkins speaks about this notion of power versus force. So I think I'd like to start there. The idea of what real power is. When we understand real power, we understand that we are working with things that are in flow rather than things that are butting up against a resistive force. When we speak of real power, we're speaking of ease. We're speaking of minimal resistance. We're speaking of presence. We're speaking of sincerity. We're speaking of that which can create, far more so than that which can destroy. So when we speak of empowerment of a being, we are actually leading them along a path wherein they can experience more and more of those aforementioned qualities as being foundational and structural to their way of being and their development of character. So in other words, empowerment of a person, a whole person as we identified in the first pillar, that empowerment process therefore is bringing them to understand how to live in a natural flow, a flow with less and less resistance to encounter in their interfaces with their environment. A sense of power, therefore, is a sense of peace, a sense of ease. We seem to have cultivated just the opposite in much of our society. We've cultivated force, conflict, competition, domination. We even have this expression that something rules. We have terminology that bespeaks so much of the negative as being the default perspective that we rush to when we assume something is happening. We go into that negativity and then we impose. Not necessarily that is what we are aware of that we are doing. We are just so conditioned to do it this way. We impose barriers of resistance to ourselves and barriers of resistance to one another. These barriers of resistance, therefore, also delimit and minimize the routes of intimacy that we are to have with one another and within ourselves. And so therefore we have to have an experience of a greater force. We're continuously having to overcome force, to realize something, to express something, to share something, to give even, to receive. And so education for empowerment is also looking at those linguistic and those psychodynamic, those psycho-emotional, psycho-spiritual, those physico-environmental dimensions of this process of the flow of true power, natural power, that natural power of just a commanding presence. So this orientation to empowerment, rather than an attempt to educate people in the forcefulness of their will, the forcefulness of their personality, the competitiveness of their drive, the desire to win, that instead these value sets are actually part and parcel of a much larger meta paradigm, which is that of the natural state of power, the powerfulness of being. And of course, at the heart of all of that power, we find unconditional love. We find allowance. We find compassion. We find the power of kindness, the power of presence. We find the power of truth. We find that within dignity is a far greater power of sincerity, rather than an imposition forcefully of one's will, one's intent to make sure that others succumb to one's intentions. So we understand that education for empowerment then is going to bring about, again, another phase of radical shifting. In another crude example, we can think of what happens often when people approach the learning of martial arts. Quite stereotypically, we know that people often are looking to learn a martial art because for them, they need to feel more secure. They want to feel that they can, they can really throw down, they can really defend themselves. They may feel unsafe, they may feel threatened. They may feel like the 98-pound wimp or weakling. And so often for them, that sense of feeling powerful by virtue of building up one's skill set in the combative arts, in the martial arts, to be able to punish someone else, to be able to break bones or even to kill someone, that this knowledge set gives them a sense of being powerful. And yes, it can do that. Yet we also recognize that if a person stays on that path, usually in a truly dedicated way, and also if they happen to have a good teacher and guide along that path of learning martial arts, what tends to happen is as a person has a sense of inner peace, they also have a greater sense of power and presence. And the application of the martial side of that art form that they have been learning becomes less and less oriented towards conflict, less and less forceful in its nature, so that the greater sense of power is not the power to hurt someone. It is indeed simply the fact that they have embarked upon a process of learning, a process of education in an ancient system or a modified version of ancient systems, which has brought them into a greater sense of integrating spirit, mind, body, and environment. That gives them a sense that the power of their presence and the power of their character is more important than the power of their fists. So we see then that an education that takes that kind of direction, that type of orientation, is an essential pillar of the integral education meta system for bringing about the enlightened whole being, this sense of power. Because that is the kind of sense of power that we can impart onto others as well. How much of a sense of power can we impart onto others when our intention is to dominate someone else? When our intention is to compete against someone else so that we win and they lose? When our intention is to pummel them and to discredit them and degrade them, humiliate them, all in the name of our winning and our prevailing? when our sense of power as a people, as a nation, is based in how much we can command our positions due to warfare and military might. What about the power of the spirit, of being? What about the power of unity? What about the power of indeed divine presence in all of us? What about the power, the simple power of supporting, of giving, the power of a smile, the power of kindness? This we know is what we must teach. And these are not simple value constructs. This is not fringe. This is essential. This is core to education. The power of intelligence. The power of existence itself as a sentient being. And the power of simply knowing, knowledge, truth, veritas. This education for empowerment. This indeed is the second pillar of the 7 pillars of integral education. I hope this is useful, and we will go on to the next.
Thank you, Dr. EnRico Melson, once again for bringing to the viewers enlightenment, not only for the heart, but also enlightening for the soul. Thank you so much, Dr. EnRico Melson.
Thank you.